Okay, we are picking up Act 3, Scene 2. Nope, wrong class. Act 5. Why did I go away? Act 5. We might jump into Hamlet today, but we'll probably just finish. So Act 4 ends. Act 4, Scene 2 goes back to Athens, and we see the tradesmen, the rude mechanicals, all together in a single space. Bottom comes in and tells them that their play is preferred. All right? This is Act 4, Scene 2 is on 1224, 1225 in your book. The previous scene ended with the four lovers wrestling with what's real. You know, are we still in a dream? Was this all a dream? What happened? And also remembering, Theseus said we're to meet him in the temple and they're all going to be married. Okay? So Act 5 opens. We're now back in Athens. Again, Act 4, Scene 2 was back in Athens. So, Act 1, Scene, hold on a second. All of Act 1 is in Athens. Go ahead and have Ralph sign it. All of Act 1 was in Athens. Act 2 through Act 4, Scene 1 is in the wood. And then Act 4, Scene 2, and all of Act 5 were back in Athens. Bear in mind, I want to point this out because a couple of you didn't do this. Victor, sign that real quickly. If a quiz or exam asks for the settings for Midsummer Night's Dream, don't put the court of Duke Theseus. It's not just the court. It's all of Athens is one setting, and then the wood is the other setting. Why? Well, if you go to this Act 4, Scene 2, that's not at the Duke's court. That's where the tradesmen are working. Okay? Thank you. So, just a little point there. So, Act 5 opens, and notice a discussion has been ongoing as Theseus, Hippolyta, and the others enter. Because Hippolyta says, "'Tis strange, my Theseus, that these lovers speak of." Now, what's that these lovers speak of? That's the conversation that's been happening seemingly before they entered the stage at this scene. And the way I've often seen it before, sometimes, is they come out with her saying those lines. So they don't wait till she's out in the stage. She's saying that. It's continuing a conversation that begins earlier, okay? So then Theseus gets this speech, some 20 lines, 21 lines, that I think, and I could be totally wrong here, okay? Be the first to admit, I could be entirely wrong. But I think this speech is really, really important, not only for this play, but for all of Shakespeare. And I'm going to spend probably 30 or 45 minutes just talking about this speech. Okay, so if you want to check out now, check out now. So, Theseus says, "More strange than true." What does he mean? More strange than true. Not true is what he means. This is not true, what they've been talking about, okay? The more strange, it's too far outside the realm of possibility. So he goes on. He kind of explains why he thinks that. "I never may believe these antique fables nor these fairy toys. Notice how I pronounce the word A-N-T-I-Q-U-E. In Shakespeare's day, our antique rhymed with that. Frantic, antic, all right? And there's a couple of, well, we don't know why necessarily, terms of sound changes and all that kind of stuff. But it's pronounced antic because it can have both meanings. In this context, it probably only has one meaning. But in other contexts, it can mean, see, we don't use the word antic anymore. We use this if we use it at all. What's it mean? Kind of crazy, kind of on edge, just ready to snap, all right? These antic, like crazy fables, or its other meaning, antique, meaning really old, nor these fairy toys. What are the antique fables and fairy toys that he's talking about? Fairy stories, myths. So what has he said? I never may believe these antique fables nor these fairy tales. Okay? Your gloss for that, for may, can. I can't believe these things. Okay? Does he tell us why? How many of you believe myths, fairy tales are real? Pretty much nobody, because they're myths, they're fairy tales, they're not history, so to speak. Whether or not you can believe history is real, something else. So he gives us a reason why not to believe these kinds of stories. Lovers and madmen have such seething brains, and I'm going to read it all through, and then I'm going to come back and take it kind of line by line. Lovers and madmen have such seething brains, such shaping fantasies, that apprehend more than cool reason ever comprehends. These two words are really important. The lunatic, the lover, and the poet are of imagination all compact. One sees more devils than vast hell can hold. That is the madman. The lover, all as frantic, sees Helen's beauty in a brow of Egypt. The poet's eye, in a fine frenzy rolling, doth glance from heaven to earth, from earth to heaven, and as imagination bodies forth the forms of things unknown, the poet's pen turns them to shapes and gives to airy nothing a local habitation and a name. Such tricks hath strong imagination that, if it would but apprehend some joy, it comprehends some bringer of that joy. I'm going to leave the last two lines for later. So, lovers and madmen have such seething brains, the shaping fantasies that apprehend more than cool reason ever comprehends. So, lovers and madmen, those two terms we don't need to talk about, they're pretty clear. What about that verb seething? What does it mean? Notice, you don't have a gloss there. The purpose of a gloss, the little circle thing and then a definition down below or explanation down below, is what? It should be to make clear something that might be unclear or something that can be misconstrued, misunderstood. How many of you on a regular basis, define regular, once a month, use the verb to seethe? Nobody. And almost nobody uses it in common English anymore. It has only one use. Well, take that back. Two uses. The second use is based or predicated on the first use, or the meaning of the first use. It's a cooking term. It refers to boiling. You seethe, used to, most people don't boil meat anymore. You used to seethe meat. You boiled it. Okay? The other use, the other context is, if you're seething mad, what does that mean? You're at your boiling point. You're about to blow up, erupt. So, lovers and madmen have seething brains. Wow. So what is that saying? If your brain is boiling, what happens? I don't mean literally. I don't know what the highest temperature you've ever had. Back in 1968, I came down with, which one was it? Hong Kong flu. That's what it was called. Hong Kong flu. Originated in Hong Kong, spread around the world. Right? Pandemic. In many senses, it was a lot worse than COVID. I was out of school for about a month because it was bad. Temperature, if I remember right, got to like 104, 105. Anybody know what happens when your temperature starts getting that high? What you do? I don't mean do as in go out and do something. What happens up here? You start seeing things. You start hallucinating. Which is why when someone's temperature gets really high, when it hits like 105, that's the time to put them in a bathtub and dump cold ice on them and fill the tub. If you don't get that temperature down low, that person will die within minutes because the brain will boil. Doesn't have to reach 212 degrees, okay? Lovers and madmen have seething brains. Their brains are boiling. Shakespeare understood enough that when somebody has a really high temperature, they see things, okay? So they have such seething brains, such shaping fantasies. You got a gloss for fantasies. Imaginations. We don't use imaginations like that. Or we don't make imagination a plural. What does he mean? Such shaping fantasies. The imagination does what? It takes or gives shape to things that are up here, okay, that apprehend more than cool reason ever comprehends. What is he saying about the imagination? Notice I've got apprehend, comprehend. If there were a student shooter up here, it's usually students, not staff, but I'm sure it can be staff. If there were a student shooter up here, what would you want MTSU and local police to do? Would you want them to comprehend? No. You want them to apprehend, take hold of that shooter. Later they can try to figure out why the shooter did what he did, or she, it's usually he, okay? To understand, to perceive. But he says the shaping fantasy does what? It apprehends, takes hold of, grasps more than cool reason ever comprehends. Notice the shaping fantasies are the result of what? The seething brains. Okay? So the apprehension, is the imagination is taking hold of something during the hot brain. And that thing that it takes hold of cannot be what? Cannot be understood by cool reason. Why? Notice comprehension, the comprehends, goes along with cool reason. Why is reason cool? Brains operating properly. Why else? What is reason not supposedly governed by? The emotions, the passions. And the passions are always boiling. The passions are down here, as I said. Reason's up here. Reason is supposed to keep them in check. It's supposed to control them. He's suggesting here, lovers and madmen are what? Their passions have taken control. Their passions have given rise to that imagination that does what? It grasps hold of what? Notice, lovers and madmen have such seething brains, such shaping fantasies that apprehend, but we're not told what they apprehend yet. They apprehend something more than cool reason ever comprehends. The cool reason can't understand what those shaping fantasies apprehend, what they take hold of. Okay? Now he expands a little bit. The lunatic, the lover, and the poet. So before we had just the lunatic, the madman, and the lover. Now Theseus, aka also Shakespeare, throws in the poet. Why? Shakespeare's a poet, I think. No, I don't think I know he's a poet. I think he's alluding to himself here. The lunatic, the lover, and the poet are of imagination all compact. That is, the lunatic is composed of the imagination. The lover is composed of the imagination, and the poet is composed of the imagination. Why is the lover composed of the imagination? That is, the imagination are the atoms, atoms, that make up the lover. Why? Is love rational? Remember Bottom's little comment to Tanya when she says, "Your virtues, fair force perforce, doth force me to swear, to say, I love you." And how does Bottom reply? Not so neither. He says, "You're mistaken." Why? Because he says, "Nowadays, reason and love have little company today." And he says, and it's a sorrow that good neighbors don't get them together. A good neighbor, as I suggested in class, probably referring to the will. So, lunatic lover and the poet are all made up of what? Imagination. Notice I don't have, what's the imagination? How do you define it? You'll hear people say about somebody, "Wow, that person has a great imagination," or "that person has a crazy what does that mean? Summer of 1931, scholar at Oxford, professor of Anglo-Saxon literature, was marking entrance exams for students who had applied to get into Oxford. He had a blue book. I've held this thing in my hand back when I was doing research on him. He was sitting in his study over his garage in his home in Oxford. Window was open, nice summer breeze blowing in. He finishes reading this one essay by the student, turns the page, it's a blank page, and he writes with his pencil on that page, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." The man had never heard the word hobbit before. He'd never seen the word hobbit before. He had no frickin' idea what a hobbit was. And he sat there and looked at it for a bit and turned the page and started marking the next essay. Or grabbed the next blue book. Where'd that come from? All of his vast reading? He'd never seen or heard the word before. Okay? Summer of 1990, J.K. Rowling was on a train from Manchester, England, down to London. She's a single mother. Her husband ditched her. Had a whirlwind romance. She got pregnant. They got married. She got pregnant. 6 months later, if I remember correctly, before her daughter was born, he ditched her. Okay. Rowling weaves this little personal history into her stories in books 5, 6, and 7. A little bit. So she's on this train from Manchester to London. She's living on the Scottish version of welfare. She's not gainfully employed. She had been when she got married to the guy. She was a teacher for Amnesty International in Portugal. And at one moment, she's just a single mother living on welfare. And the next moment, she's still just a single mother living on welfare, but an idea has popped into her mind. And the idea is that a boy discovers on his 11th birthday that his parents were murdered by the greatest dark wizard who ever lived, and that dark wizard is after him, and his name is Harry Potter. That's 1990. Within 17 years, she goes from being on welfare to being wealthier than the Queen of England. She wrote those 7 books and became a multi-billionaire. Okay? That's not the important part. Well, not for me because I'm jealous and envious. Where'd the idea come from? That's kind of what Shakespeare's... How does the imagination work? Why did that idea happen to her and not to me? Why did J.R.R. Tolkien in A Hole in the Ground There Lived a Hobbit and not me? Where do those kinds of literary ideas come from? How did Einstein, to take a non-literary view, come up with E equals mc squared? Was it merely, simply, entirely by study, or did he have what's often just simply called the aha moment, where the light bulb goes off and something happens? That's kind of the explanation for imagination. It's the, to use language Shakespeare's going to use in just a moment, the biting forth of things unknown. It's the spontaneous eruption up here of things that haven't occurred, existed before. Okay? What is it when Hippolytus is talking about? 'Tis strange what these lovers talk of. Their experiences in the wood. They don't know if it was real or not. So, lunatic lover and the poet are of imagination all compact. One sees more devils than vast hell can hold. That's the madman. In Shakespeare's day, it was thought that because lunatics were crazy, that they saw, and some of them said this, they saw devils everywhere. Not little, the horns, the tail, the pitchfork. Demons, spirits, everywhere. This is an example of what modern day, what psychological term would be used to describe this? Paranoia. Thinking everybody's out to get them. Okay? So that's the lunatic. The lover, all as frantic. On the edge, ready to blow up any moment. What? The lover sees Helen's beauty in a brow of Egypt. And I should have brought one for my first class. Well, this will work. What's Helen's beauty? I think I've talked in here before. What's the Elizabethan notion of beauty? That. What do I mean? Whiteness? No, not per se. White what? Complexion. Notice, this is not as white as that. I could go around to every white person in this room and you go, nope. Who is as white as this? Yeah, nobody. Nobody is this white. Where did they get the idea? We don't know where they came up with this. It's not just whiteness per se. It's artificial whiteness. And we do know every image that survives, painting, of Queen Elizabeth, her face is this, white, because it's powdered. Like powdered sugar. Not literal powdered sugar, but that kind of way. So, the lover sees what? The lover, all is crazy, or frantic, sees Helen's beauty. Who's Helen? Helen of Troy, your gloss says patron of beauty. Helen of Troy, who's, according to the poet, Chapman writes a poem on looking into Homer's, the face that launched 1,000 ships. It's all because of Helen of Troy, Helen being captured by Paris of Troy, that the Trojan War occurs. It's all to get her back, all right? Sees Helen's beauty, and Helen in the mythology and the Iliad and such, Helen is the most beautiful woman who ever lived. She's more beautiful than the goddesses. And in one sense, that's why the Trojan War occurs. Because Venus and Hera are jealous of her beauty. Paris chooses her beauty over that of Venus and Hera. Okay? The lover sees Helen's beauty in a brow of Egypt. What's a brow of Egypt? Your gloss. Face of a gypsy. No. Egypt does not refer to gypsy. Egypt refers to Egypt or North Africa. A brow of North Africa means a face with the color of somebody from North Africa, like modern day Egypt or Morocco, Algiers, Libya. Not this kind of white, but also not sub-Saharan African dark. Okay? All Theseus is saying is not the standard model or image of beauty. Because the lover sees what? What does the lover behold in the beloved? Love. What's the phrase we have? Love exists where? In the eye of the beholder. Have you ever seen people, I don't usually go off on this, but I will. Have you ever seen couples that you look at and you just kind of wonder, how the hell did that happen? Used to be a guy, he's still around, he hasn't died or anything. Trump's, what was he? Treasury Secretary. I think it was Treasury. Named Robert Richard something Mnuchin. He's got a weird last name. Mnuchin. He's this kind of little, short, maybe my height, maybe a little shorter, pasty, white, nerdy looking dude. His wife, literally, I'm not kidding, is a swimsuit model. I mean, drop dead gorgeous. And you would look at those two and go, how? What does she see? Well, love, what is in the eye of the beholder? I'm sure she sees things a lot of other people would never see about him. That's kind of what's being gotten at here. Okay? Notice, does it make sense? Seeing Helen's beauty in the brow of Egypt? No, it doesn't. The lunatics seeing devils everywhere. Doesn't make sense. In other words, there's no comprehension to that. The poet's eye, in a fine frenzy rolling. Is there? No, there's not a gloss. I always wonder how people come up with what lines to gloss and what not to gloss. What does in a fine frenzy rolling mean? What do crazy people supposedly do? Their eyes are rolling in their heads because they can't focus on one thing. They're looking at everything and they're just, you know. That's what that image is. The poet's eye, in a fine frenzy rolling, notice, doth glance, not stare. What's the difference between a glance and a stare? A stare, you really look at it. You focus on it. It glances from, and notice where it begins, from earth to heaven. From heaven to earth, from earth to heaven. It starts up there, comes down here, goes from here, back to up there. And as imagination bodies forth the forms of things unknown, how does imagination body forth? That is, give body to, give shape to the forms of things unknown. Have any of you ever seen a dinosaur? Absolutely not a dinosaur. You've all seen Jurassic Park, but even those aren't real. A dragon. Has anyone ever seen a dragon? Paleontologists and such say, no, dragons aren't real. There have never been dragons. Have any of you ever seen a unicorn? No. Why? They're not then how do we know what they look like? Because somebody, eons ago, thought it would be cool, for some reason, to see a horse with a big horn sticking out of its noggin. And somebody, or somebodies, eons ago, thought it would be cool to have a giant lizard. Some of them have wings, some do not, that breathe fire. Okay? J.R.R. Tolkien, in a famous essay he wrote on fairy stories, said something to the effect of course dragons aren't real, but I wanted to live in a world in which the possibility of their being real existed. And so he ends up creating Middle Earth, where you can have dragons. Okay? Imagination bodies forth the forms of things unknown. What's the example of that in the play? It's the whole play. Did Theseus really, a real Theseus, really deliver these lines? Nope. It's all a fiction. Where did it begin? In Shakespeare's mind. Or in Shakespeare's sources that he reads, and he, mixes them all up in his mind, and out comes this. Where did J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit come from? In terms of the word, no idea. Okay? But in terms of the world of The Hobbit, all of his reading that gets mixed up in his mind, he calls it the soup of cauldron, okay? Or the cauldron of tales. All these tales get mixed up, and he does that. So, as imagination bodies forth, the forms of things unknown. So the forms of things unknown. If the things are unknown, how can they have form? Think about that for a bit. Cognitive scientists, people who study not the brain, but how the brain works and how thinking works. There's a variety of ideas of what thinking is. Can you think without words? Do babies think before they learn language? Do dogs think and cats think? Okay. Personally, I'm convinced they do, because my cat knows exactly what buttons to push to drive me crazy. If I'm sitting there grading things, the cat will come, and on the door to our study, we've got these French doors like this. And the cat knows if it gently pushes on one of the doors, it'll rattle against the little catch it keeps it up here. And the cat somehow knows that little rattling noise drives me crazy. It's like somebody coming in and eating Doritos. The cat knows exactly what to do. And I'm like, George, get the hell. The forms of things, if the things are unknown, how do they have form? See, this is, we've gone from, this is just a light and airy play, Midsummer Night's Dream, it means nothing, to some of the deepest philosophical questions, right? Such as, asked by the Velveteen Rabbit, great story by the way, what is real? As imagination bodies forth the forms of things unknown, the poet's pen turns them to shapes and gives to airy nothing a local habitation and a name. Airy nothing, what's that? You guys don't have to do one for this class. I used to require these up until, 4 or 5 years ago. But every one of you will probably, in some other course in your college career, require you to write a paper. Where will that paper begin? Up here. I'm not saying you're airheads. But that idea is an airy nothing. Why? It has no solidity. It has no reality until you do this. Until you type it into this and either print it out or hit send. And only then does your airy nothing become what? Take on a form in my hands, or ultimately, if it's successful, in my head. See, the thing students don't, I tell them this in classes where I require papers, the thing you don't want me to write on your paper is, I have no idea what you mean. Or as I usually sum it up, huh? H-U-H, question mark, question mark, question mark. That means, whoosh. It means your airy nothing is still an airy nothing as far as I'm concerned. You haven't bodied it forth. You haven't given this idea shape and structure and argument, okay? So, and as imagination bodies forth the forms of things unknown, the poet's pen turns them to shapes and gives to airy nothing a local habitation and a name, such as Athens, Theseus's court. Bottom, Puck, Titania, Oberon. Where did these exist? Shakespeare's mind, he gives them shape. And now, 400 years after his death, people are still reading, because you're forced to, but people are still going and seeing this play every year around the world. Such tricks have strong imagination that, if it would but apprehend some joy, if the imagination would grasp, take hold of some joy, that is, something that brings joy, then it what? It comprehends some bringer of that joy. What? Okay, pause there for a minute. Plato, ancient Greek philosopher, student of Socrates, teacher of Aristotle. Plato, in the Republic, I'm pretty sure it's book 10 of the Republic, tells a story called the Allegory of the Cave. Okay? The Republic is all about the perfect state. The perfect state with the perfect government. One of the little interesting things about that perfect state is he doesn't allow poets or storytellers. No stories in this perfect republic. Why? Because poets and stories, fiction writers, give ideas. And ideas can be dangerous. Okay? So in the Allegory of the Cave, what Plato is trying to do is he's trying to get across to his readers, and he puts this in the mouth of Socrates. He's trying to get across to his readers what is real, what is really real, okay? And he says, our lives, our experience, everything that happens here, not this classroom, here meaning planet Earth, it's all a mere copy. In other words, none of this is really real. Early 90s, there was a film that came out that posited this same idea. Ended up becoming 3 films by the, I can never say their name, the Wachowski, whatever. At that point, brothers, now they're sisters. What film? Anybody know? The Matrix. Take the red pill and what happens? And that terminology, red pilling, has become part of our political discourse today. Because it's not, people who have quote unquote been red pilled, the scales have fallen from their eyes and they now see our politics as they really are rather than like in the Matrix. Because according to the Matrix, where are we all actually? If that story is real, true. We're not aware of it, but each one of us is plugged up now in a pod. We've got the sling sticking in the back of our neck. And we're what? We're hallucinating all this. All this are images being put into our minds. Okay? It's very similar to Plato's Allegory of the Cave. Here's Plato's allegory. So you have the real world somewhere else. Let's say out there. And that real world is really real. It is lit by a light, okay? And that light is, to use the Latin phrase that describes the Greek idea, the summum bonum, the highest good. That's God. The ultimate being. Not the Christian God, not the Muslim, just monotheistic God. The highest that is. All right? That gives light to everything in that world. That is the world of forms or ideas. For example, oh, I can't do that in here. Rats. So, that is the world that says, nope. What is this? Anybody, it's a chair. How do you know it's a chair? I'm not being silly, I'm not being facetious. Describe the qualities of a chair. Has a seat, right, that you sit on. okay? Got a back. What is it if it doesn't have a back that you can sit on? Stool. Stools don't have backs unless they're bar stools. Why isn't a bar stool a chair? A little different, okay? Do all chairs have these? Nope. Do all chairs have these kinds of legs, this kind of cover? Nope, okay? So this has some of the qualities of chairness. But this chair is different than that chair because that chair also has that flat thing that you can open and close that makes it also a desk. And those chairs are different than this chair, which does not have arms, and different than that chair that has a round thing you're supposed to move and stuff. But they all have certain qualities of what's essentially chairness, okay? So the idea of the chairness means you're up here in the world of forms or ideas, the ultimate reality of the thing. So every chair that exists down here, ultimately they all point to one ideal of chairness, just as this is one kind of a bottle, there's a different kind of bottle. They're similar, but they're not quite exact, or not quite the same. One kind of phone, some of you have Samsungs, others. Out there in Plato's world of forms and ideals, there is the perfect phone. It never dies. Calls always go through, that kind of thing. All right? So that's out there. Here, however, is where we live. So this is out here. This is ultimate reality. So in this allegory of the cave, he says, imagine somebody down in a cave. So you have this entrance, comes down here. The first thing in this image, you have a fire. Fire produces two things, heat and light, okay? Is the light produced by a fire like the lights in this room? Why not? It's not constant. Fires flicker. Flames go up, they go down. These lights don't. Though every now and then, these fluorescents do. Okay? And if you're epileptic, that's not good. So, you've got this fire. It produces kind of intermittent light. Beneath that, there's a flat spot, and there are people walking back and forth, holding things like this, and they just walk, and then they turn around and they walk the other way. And the things that they hold, okay, create what? So you have the fire behind that, it produces light, the light hits this thing and projects what on this wall at the innermost part of the cave? Kind of barely see it there, the shadow, okay? On the other side of this little wall, beyond where the people are carrying these things back and forth, are people who are chained. And they are chained in such a way that their backs are to this wall, and their heads are chained so they cannot move. All they see is the wall ahead of them. They can't do this. They hear stuff behind them, but they can't see it. All they see are these images projected on that wall. This is us. We're all chained. All that we see are what? Shadows. What's the difference between shadows and reality? We're going to hear Hamlet talk about shadows and reality in his play. If I were to somehow turn off some of these lights and have a spotlight, and I did this so that you could see this and see this, how many of you would take this, the thing being projected here, as this? Well, in here, none of us would. Why? Because you can see the difference between what is between the light and the image that's being cast. See, here in our world, we can't see the difference. All we see are the images, the shadows. Remember when Shakespeare, when Theseus said, it bodies forth the forms of things unknown? These are the forms, the shadows, of things unknown, things that we don't know. We have an idea. That's why I said, this has chairness, this has chairness, that has chairness, but none of us can define perfectly, wholly, completely, what is a chair? Because we haven't seen the perfect chair. Okay? Such tricks has strong imagination, that if it would but apprehend some joy, it comprehends some bringer of that joy. See, the joy is what? It's the image. That's the thing we see. It apprehends that. It can reach out to that. But he goes on and says, if it can apprehend that joy, if it can see that joy, then what does it do? It says there must be some bringer. That is, there must be some ultimate reality that is the source of that joy. The thing that is obstructing light and causing the shadow. We're not just talking about some stupid romantic comedy anymore. This is now getting down to what's really, really important. And in Shakespeare's day, there was conversation, there was argument, there were people put to death. And this could be why he includes this kind of stuff here. Over what's called the real presence of Christ in the communion. You know, when Christians gather and they take what's called communion, they drink the body, drink the blood, eat the body of Christ. You know, the little communion wafer if you're Catholic, okay? Or bread and wine if you're Protestant usually. There was a huge debate throughout the 16th century. Was Christ really, truly, physically present in that? Does that piece of bread literally become his flesh? Well, the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages, they came up with a term to describe what happens. Big long word, transubstantiation. And it's important because it relates to these two ideas, which are, you know, I've got here and I've got here. Transubstantiation. Why did the Catholic Church come up with this? Because the Catholic Church, medieval Catholic Church, wanted to apply reason to everything. It wanted to make everything reasonable, rational. Okay? Shakespeare, by the way, is suggesting you can't. You can't. Love. You can't say it totally makes sense. So, the idea of transubstantiation said that piece of bread that is used to represent Christ actually becomes the physical flesh, like skin and muscle of Christ. Okay? That is its substance. It becomes changed into that. All right? But its accidents, these are the two terms I could use, its appearance is what? Just bread. Which is why if you're a Christian and you go to a Catholic church and you celebrate the Mass and you partake of the Eucharist or communion, when you put that little piece of wafer in your mouth, it tastes like a cracker. Its accidents, its appearance is cracker. But its essence has become the body of Christ. And the blood, the wine, tastes like wine. Doesn't taste like blood. Everybody in here has tasted blood before. You got in a cut, and you've done that. Wine doesn't taste like that, okay? Because if it did, if in the Catholic Protestant churches, people were tasting it, guess what? They wouldn't do it, all right? This has a certain accident appearance. What does it look like? It's a sweater. What's it made out of? You may not know, but this is 100% wool. That is, it's what? Ultimately, lamb. It comes from a sheep or lamb, okay? This stuff, not what's inside it, is ultimately what? If you're against all petroleum products, you're against this. Why? Plastic is petroleum products. If you wear polyester, it's petroleum. If you have stuff like this Formica, it's petroleum products. If you listen to CDs, petroleum products. If you have glasses, petroleum products. Take petroleum products away, and you're going back 300 years. All right? So accidents in substance, the real world, Plato's world of forms and ideas, that's the substance. Our world down here, this is what appears to be real. This is what C.S. Lewis called the shadowlands. So, such tricks have strong imagination that if it would but apprehend some joy, it comprehends some bringer of that joy. Why have I spent over 30 minutes on all this? We're nearly 30 minutes. No, take it back, over 30 minutes, close to an hour now. He's talking about where does joy come from? Where do these ideas come from? They're not here, folks. There must be something else. There must be something more. When we get to Hamlet, Hamlet has a best friend. His name is Horatio. He's a Stoic. Okay? Stoics thought, ancient Roman Stoics, thought everything that we can see, that's all that's real. That's it. This is all there is. You live, you die. What you think of as being you, your consciousness, your soul, whatever, it dissipates and disappears. Hamlet tells him, there's more in heaven and earth than is dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio. That's why Hamlet gives us 2 or 3 speeches about suicide. Because for Hamlet, the problem isn't suicide. The problem is about what happens after suicide. If this is the world of forms and ideals, what happens afterwards? J.K. Rowling addresses it in her first novel, in the first Harry Potter novel. Professor Dumbledore tells Harry that life's all about choices and such. And he says, to the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. In other words, death is not the end. Death is an opening. Death is a beginning. So, if it would apprehend some joy, it comprehends some bringer of that joy. Why is he talking about this when what they were talking about are these strange whatevers? Because he's getting at that. Something is behind what they were talking about. Okay? And then he brings it right back down to earth, to a very simple image everybody can understand. Or in the night, imagining some fear, how easy is a bush supposed to bear? Imagining, creating an image in the mind that there is something dangerous. What? It's nighttime, it's dark, you can't see correctly. What can a large, darkened thing off to your periphery easily seem to be? A bear. I don't remember if it was this class or not. One of my classes, I mentioned growing up in the 60s, San Francisco Bay Area, what's now called Silicon Valley, Santa Clara Valley. I went to bed, I can remember many nights in the late 60s, 68, 69, being afraid that somebody's going to come in my room, and that somebody was the Zodiac killer. Because he started killing people not 15 miles from where I lived. And he was never caught. Okay? I thought he was going to come in my window. Several years later, one of my sisters and I, 5 kids in my family, I'm the youngest, we were out trick-or-treating, it's Halloween, I must have been, I don't know, 11, maybe 12. And we went down our street, and a guy had moved in. I don't remember when exactly he had moved in. He'd moved into a house that friends of ours had lived in many years before. And we went to his house. We didn't know anything about him. Light was on. Even that was the thing back then. Light on, indicating, go get your goods. And door was open, and he invited us in. And we were like, don't think so. Black light, and the inside, the wall, I'm not kidding, the walls of the front room painted black. I mean, like, pitch black. We said, no, thank you. We didn't take anything, by the way. And we left, and he started following us for a little bit. Okay? Found out, see that? So that must have been around 72, 74. Found out about 14 years later, 12, 14 years later. Look him up on the internet. The guy was a mass murderer. He was if I remember correctly, the greatest mass serial killer in California history. His name's Leonard Lake. He was found, and an accomplice, like 17, 20 bodies, something like that, in the Central Valley. Okay? So, fear, the imagination can do what? He used the word, but he didn't use it in the context we use it. The imagination can play tricks on you, right? I remember at times, if I didn't close my closet door going to bed, I'd wake up and I'd see something dark, and because I wasn't fully awake, you assume it's something else. Okay? So he goes from bringing up kind of all of this to the imagination can do what? It can make you see things that aren't there. Okay? So, highfalutin, philosophy, theology, all this. Hippolyta. But all the story of the night told over and all their minds transfigured so together? She says. This isn't Fancy's images. What's her point? This isn't an image of something. This really happened to them. If all of us right now had some whatever experience, and we walked out of here and started talking about it, individually, some totally mind-blowing thing, like, Yoda appears or whatever, and disappears. And we all see it, and we start talking about it, and then we go out on our way, and the people we've talked to, what are they all going to think about us? Sherman's finally lost it, He should have retired years before, but they're going to say about you, what? Mass hypnosis? Mass hallucination? I have some kind of spell? How would they explain that? They can't. That's why, people take military pilots and jet pilots' testimonies not with a grain of salt. They place a lot of weight in them when they go, I was flying on along and I just saw this thing appear and it blew my mind. Listened to a thing the other day. Some American Airlines pilot. He's talking to another pilot. He goes, did you see that? Another pilot, what? The thing I just saw that did a 180? It went north, south, north in less than a second. That is, it went from here to here and back to here in less than a second. Guy goes, no, I saw this other plane that was, you go, no, you're not understanding. It did a 180 in under a second. No, I haven't seen anything like that. Inexplicable, right? She says they all saw the same thing, which is why when there's corroborating witnesses to things like that, the authorities start to take them a little bit more seriously, okay? So, she says, it more witnesseth than Fancy's images and grows to something of great constancy. However strange and admirable. Admirable, you've got a gloss there, line 26, I think. Yeah, source of wonder. That is, can't figure it out, all right? So, Philostrate comes in with a couple of others, And he gives Theseus a list of things to be done. Plays, jugglers, all that kind of stuff. All right? And he mentions a play by the Rude Mechanicals, Pyramus and Thisbe. And he tells him, line 61, a play there is, my lord, some 10 words long, which is as brief as I have known a play, but by 10 words, my lord, it is too long. So the play is 10 words long, but it's 10 words too long. In other words, really bad play. Who are performing this? Theseus asks. Hard-handed men that work in Athens. In other words, men that make their living with their hands, not their heads. We'll have it. No, you don't want this one. They can't do it. I want that play, Theseus says. 82. Never anything can be amiss when simpleness and duty tender it. That is, there can't be anything wrong with it. When simpleness, that is, they're doing their best, and duty, they feel like they have an obligation to me, render it. Okay? Hippolyta, I don't want to see this. I don't want to see wretchedness overcharged. What does she mean by wretchedness? These lowlifes. I don't want to see people without the brain skills try to do something they can't do. He says you won't see any such thing. But he says they can't do it. Theseus, the kinder we, what? To give them thanks for nothing. Why does he call their production of the play nothing? Because Philostrate has said they can't do it. So they're going to completely fail. He says, then we will be the kinder. Why? To give them thanks for the nothing that they've given us. Our sport, that is our entertainment, shall be to take what they mistake. That is, we will take according to their intentions what they are not able to produce. What are we talking about? Their intentions is this, the substance. What they're able to produce is the accidents, the shadows. We will take the shadows that they produce and read what out of that? The reality of what they intended. Okay? And he goes on and talks about how he's come to places, and people, clerks as he calls them, have prepared these great speeches to welcome him. And then he walks in all of his ducely, whatever, glory. And what happens to the person making the speech? They get tongue-tied. I was listening to talk radio years ago, and there was a big talk radio person heard around the States and all that kind of stuff. And somebody called in and actually got through. You know, if you listen to talk radio, I don't listen to it anymore. But it used to be you'd call in and you'd have to call in like 3 hours ahead of time to try to get in. So this person's been on hold, waiting. And finally gets through, and the radio show host says something like, hi, you're on, and the other person just immediately couldn't speak. Calm down, take a breath. Then the radio host just calmly, gently walked them through it, got them to say what they wanted to say, etc. That's what Theseus is talking about. And he says, what I took from that was this person had intended to be praiseworthy, all this great stuff. And that's what I accepted from them. If you ever have children, your child, children, whatever, will at some point draw something for you. And it'll look like Stevie Wonder drew it. I mean, you're going to wonder, what the hell is that supposed to be? Never, when a child hands you a drawing, and say, oh, that's a beautiful dog, John. It's not a dog, Daddy, it's a cat. Because you just say, man, that's great. Tell me what you think it is, or describe it to me. How did you come up? Let the child fill in those blanks. That's what he's talking about, okay? So, Peter Quince comes in and gives us the prologue. And I'm going to go quickly for the rest of this. We've got 15 minutes. His prologue, as it is printed in your book, is wrong. Okay? You have to be aware of that. The prologue, as printed, is printed according to how he delivers it. And what I mean by that is his oratorical presentation. We're going to be told by Theseus at the end of it, this fellow doth not stand upon points. That is, he doesn't follow the rules of punctuation. Okay, why? Because pauses, commas, periods, semicolons are important. Today, we punctuate solely grammatically. Okay? An independent clause ends with a period, or a semicolon, or a colon. If it ends with a semicolon, you can start another independent clause. If you have an independent clause, I went to the store, and then you say, I bought some milk, and you don't have any punctuation between those, you have what's called a fused sentence, or a comma splice, without the comma. Okay? You've got to have a comma and a conjunction, or a semicolon, or a period after I went to the store, comma, and I bought some milk, semicolon, I bought some milk, colon, I bought some milk, etc. Listen to it as delivered. If we offend, it is with our good will. What does that mean? I am intending to offend you. Okay? That you should think we come not to offend, but with goodwill. That is, we want you to think that we come with the intention of offending you. To show our simple skill, this is the true beginning of our end. To show that we are idiots. Yep, that's the whole point. That's not what he means. Here's what he means. If we offend, it is with our goodwill that you should think we come not to offend. Notice, it's the exact opposite. But Peter Quince doesn't realize that. Why? He's used to working with his hands, not his mind. But with goodwill to show our simple skill, that is the true beginning of our end. We just want to put on a good play for you guys, but we're simple-minded, okay? So, he finishes the speech, and then we get the real prologue, all right? And we have characters mentioned. We're going to skip through most of it. We have Pyramus and Thisbe. Pyramus finds what he thinks the remains of Thisbe are, her torn sash with blood all in it, and so he kills himself for her. And says, line 280 and following, back up, 270, and out sword and wound or wound the pap of Pyramus, that is, his chest, I that left pap, where heart doth pop, thus die I, thus. And you don't have an indication, but when he says thus, what is Bottom doing as Pyramus? He pulls that knife back out, or sword, and he goes, thus die I, thus. That's 4 stab wounds to the heart. No, pretty much 1 stab wound's going to do it. Now am I dead. And yet he's still talking. Now am I fled. That is, my soul has left my body. My soul is in the sky. Tongue, lose thy light. Moon, take thy flight. Now, die. And I've seen productions when he does the die, he stabs himself again, even though his soul has supposedly left his body. What does this tell us? The guy's a freaking moron. I mean, he doesn't get it. He's being serious. He doesn't realize how humorous this is. Okay, so they talk back and forth. Thisbe comes in, says her lines, kills herself. Come blade my breast imbrue, and farewell friends, thus Thisbe ends, adieu, adieu, adieu. And again, several productions I've seen, each adieu, she stabs herself. Okay? Theseus, moonshine, and lion, this is line 329, are left to bury the dead, because they're on the stage still. Demetrius, I and wall too. And what happens? Okay. Bottom, as Pyramus, is dead on the stage. Bottom goes, he gets up. No, I assure you, the wall is down, the part of their fathers. Will it please you to... He's just done what? If you know anything about theater or even film, he's broken what? The fourth wall. The fiction is now totally gone. And Theseus says, no, please God, no epilogue. Okay? So, Theseus says, let's go to bed, folks. Why? It's his marriage night. He hasn't slept with Hippolyta yet. The other lovers, get them right, Lysander and Hermia, and Demetrius and Helena are going to go off to their marriage beds. So everybody leaves. Puck comes out. Says this nice little poem. In come Oberon and Titania and all the other fairies. And Oberon gives a command to the fairies. He says, now until the break of day, 78, through this house each fairy stray. To the best bride bed will we, that is, Theseus and Hippolyta's. And the issue which by us shall blessed be. So they're going to go in as supernatural beings, and they're going to confer blessings on Theseus and Hippolyta. And the issue there create ever shall be fortunate. That is, from here to the end of time, Theseus and Hippolyta's children and descendants will be blessed. So shall all the couples three ever true in loving be. There will be no falsehood between them. There will be no disloyalty, no unfaithfulness. And the blots of nature's hand shall not in their issue stand. None of these couples will have children with mole or harelip or scar, nor mark prodigious such as are despised in nativity, shall upon their children be. Okay? So, they leave. Puck is left. And the way I've usually seen this, several times at least, Puck comes out with a broom. He's been sweeping. And says, if we shadows have offended. Okay, so if they're shadows, then what does that mean? We talked about down here? Yes, to an extent. But what else? Every shadow has what? I don't know how to put this language. Behind it or ahead of it. There's a source. If it apprehends some joy, it what? Comprehends some bringer of that joy. So there must be a source behind the shadows. If we shadows have offended, that is, if anything we've said here bothers you, and a lot of Shakespeare does bother a lot of people, think but this, and all is mended. Just listen to what I have to say, and everything will be fine. That you have but slumbered here, while these visions did appear. So if we shadows have offended you, don't worry about it. Why? Because it's just a dream. That's why they're shadows. So when you go back into the real world, the waking world, because one of the things Plato kind of suggests, but not fully, Shakespeare does, is that this whole realm, the Shadowlands and everything, we're not fully awake. The Matrix kind of does that. We're not fully awake. It's only when we fully wake up that we'll see reality as it really is. In this weak and idle theme, no more yielding but a dream. Okay? Gentles, do not reprehend. That is, don't reprehend this weak and idle theme. What's the theme? Well, he says this weak and idle theme will have no more yielding. That is, it will give way to nothing more than a dream. How productive are dreams? What do dreams produce in your lives? There's a film, What Dreams May Come. Cuba Gooding Jr., Robin Williams, a couple others. And it's all about dreams. It's ultimately about a guy whose wife commits suicide and he goes into the underworld to find her. It's the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice writ large, or updated to today. But it's kind of about what's the ultimate reality. But what dreams may come is, how do dreams affect our lives? If you pardon, we will mend. That is, if you forgive us, we'll fix everything. And as I am an honest Puck, if we have unearned luck now to escape the serpent's tongue, unearned luck, that is nothing we've done to deserve this. What does it mean to escape the serpent's tongue? That's how people express their displeasure with plays in Shakespeare's day. They didn't say boo, start shooting and picking up stuff off the ground and throwing it at them. We will make amends ere long, else the Puck a liar call. So within the context of the story, is it okay to call Puck a liar? Maybe. So good night unto all. Give me your hands if we be friends, and Robin shall restore amends. What does it mean, give me your hands? Usually the audience has already started applauding by this point. And he's saying, when you applaud, what? The amends will be made, because that's an indication of what? The dream has come to an end. And you'll wake up, not literally because audience is awake, but it will be like a mere vexation of a dream. And people get up and they start to leave and they walk out and they talk about what it is they saw, and within hours, days, weeks, months, they start to forget, just like in a dream. Okay, we'll stop there. I'll put up the second quiz for Midsummer Night's Dream today. I've already got that won't get included in the midterm grades that I have to report by tomorrow. I've already got them all calculated. I don't think I have my grade book with me though. Those will get posted later on today. You ought to be able to access them. I don't know how quickly, but via pipeline. Most everybody's doing pretty well. All right, have a good spring break. Go somewhere where it's not going to be rainy like it is here.